This program is brought to you by Stanford University. Please visit us at stanford.edu.
Welcome again on this election eve, 2008, to the Geography of U.S. Presidential Elections. Thank you for coming, and thanks as well to those who may be listening to this lecture at iTunes University. What I want to do today is very quickly go through recent presidential election history so that we can have time to focus on the 2004 election and really get down into some detailed county-level analysis for a number of different states. The overall point I want to make for the historical section is that the Democratic Party faced a real challenge, a geographical challenge, after the disastrous election for the Democrats in 1972 when they were reduced to Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. If you remember, before 1964 had seen this great transition or transformation that had been hinted at previously but came in full sway in 64 when the Democrats lost the Deep South entirely and the Republicans gained it. So here's the Democratic Party, which had relied so heavily on a solid base in the South, now has lost that geographical region. And at the same time, the Democrats were facing another problem with the declining cities, the industrial cities of the Northeast and Midwest, which had been the other great geographical strength for the Democratic Party. Cities were beginning to decline. Suburbs were growing rapidly, and the suburbs were the area where the Republicans had the greatest strength. Even mining areas were in decline as mining was mechanized. And so the question becomes, how are the Democrats going to address this crisis? What they did in the next election was to turn to a Southerner, a Southern moderate, Jimmy Carter from Georgia, try to reclaim that lost geographical landscape of the South. And as you can see, so they did so quite successfully. The Republicans had been embarrassed by the Watergate scandal. Gerald Ford had made some flubs in the debates. And Carter went on to a very, very narrow victory. You could see it was just a couple percentage points in the popular election. And the Democrats did very poorly in the West, the Pacific Coast and the interior West, but really had pretty much gone back to getting almost the entire South, except Virginia. That's in California, if you look at it, that same election, you can see a continuation of those earlier patterns where, yes, the Democrats under Jimmy Carter take San Francisco and take Alameda with Oakland and Berkeley, but the rest of the Bay Area pretty much going to Gerald Ford. And with the Democrats having still strong strength in rural farm counties in the San Joaquin Valley, even up in Lassen County, which today votes for Republicans by about 80 or 85%. So you hadn't gone yet through this transformation, of which California is one of the first states where the suburbs start swinging in the Democratic direction. The next election, 1980, was another disaster for the Democrats. The Carter years saw stagflation and problems such as the Iranians taking hostages in the American embassy in Tehran. Many people saw Carter as a fairly ineffectual leader. And in that election, the Democrats are reduced to Carter's home state in Georgia, West Virginia, mining stronghold, heavily unionized, Maryland, Rhode Island, and Minnesota, which had a very strong Democratic Party. Actually, in Minnesota, it's not the Democratic Party. It's, what do they call it, the Farmer Labor Democrat Party. It's a joined party that actually goes back to some extent, back to the populist period. But Minnesota had a very strong Democratic establishment at that time. 4 years later, with Walter Mondale from Minnesota running against Ronald Reagan, we go back down to one state and the District of Columbia. So the Democrats, again, are back where they were in 72 without any sort of electoral foundation to build upon. What are they going to do? Well, the next election sees some gains in 1988 with Michael Dukakis from Massachusetts. The Democrats are seeking someone who is well known as a sort of a modern politician. He made efficiency the core of his campaign, running against George Bush the Senior. Again, closer this time. You can see the popular vote, 53 to 45, not a close election. The Democrats are gaining in the Pacific Northwest, still not taking California. They do have New York this time. Most of New England is still Republican territory. Democrats still have West Virginia, but not much else. So the Democrats are still floundering. What they do in the next election is go back to the moderate Southerner, Bill Clinton from Arkansas, to try to regain Southern territory in the election. And as you can see, quite successful, running again against Bush. This was an election where the economy was the big focus, recession year, and Clinton pushed heavily on that. And you can see the results, taking a swath of states through the central part of the country, from Louisiana all the way up to Minnesota, taking most of the Northeast and the Great Lakes states, with the exception of Republican Indiana. Not getting all the South by any means, but getting about half of the southern states and taking about half of the western states as well. So it seemed like a pretty good strategy. This was an interesting election because it was another one of these three-way elections with Ross Perot, who ran very heavily on the deficit issue. I know some of you can remember Perot with his flip charts and his half-hour infomercial, which was actually very detailed. So you can see Clinton was far from getting a majority with 43% of the vote. Perot didn't take any states. He was pretty erratic. He was in the campaign. He was out of the campaign. He went into the campaign as well, again, but with almost 19% of the vote, did quite well. It's really interesting to see where Perot did the best, because when you get some of these third-party candidates, you can see some things that disappear when you just look at the two parties. Because you can think of states like Alaska and Utah and Idaho and Kansas, very Republican voting states, as recently states like Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina have been. But when it came to Ross Perot, very, very different story indeed. Perot came in second in Maine after Clinton, and second in Utah as well. So he did very well in the West, not well at all in the South. So again, you can see this real distinction between Intermontane West, the Southeast. They often both vote Republicans, but underneath that, there's some very, very different patterns. We'll see that again with some of the other campaigns. 1996, Clinton running again. Perot still in there, but his support has declined significantly. This map in 96 looks a lot like the previous one. Again, Clinton's certainly winning his home state of Arkansas, Louisiana. Again, a solid swath of states through the middle of the country. Loses Colorado, but picks up Arizona. Loses Georgia, but picks up Florida. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same map. And you can see Clinton came very close to getting a majority, didn't quite do it in this election. And in 2000, the Democrats are again going with the Southern candidate, Al Gore, who had been vice president from Tennessee. He does not take his home state. It actually wasn't even all that close. And you get a very different map. You get a map that looks a lot like the map of 2004, with just a couple of exceptions, like New Mexico, Iowa, and New Hampshire. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same map. So even though Gore was another Southern candidate of a moderate political background, he was, by the time of the election, much more associated with the liberal wing. He ran on a more liberal or progressive platform. And he was also heavily tied in with environmentalism, being probably the greenest major candidate we've had. A strategy that did not sell very well in the South, didn't sell very well in much of the Intermontane West either. But very, very narrow. And of course, as you remember, Gore actually did win a plurality of the votes, but did not win because of the Electoral College. And Ralph Nader with 2.7 is often viewed as having spoiled it for Gore because of the Florida vote, where Nader took around 100,000. Going to Kerry and Bush, 2004. Very similar map, like I said, with a few exceptions. And we will look a lot at this map in just a few minutes. But sorry the slides are out of order. I should have had this one earlier. Looking at the Nader vote in 2000. Again, you can see some really interesting things. He wasn't on the ballot in South Dakota, Oklahoma, or North Carolina and got no votes at all. But look at Alaska, a state that we associate as a very conservative state. Certainly it's associated strongly today with vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin. But yet here is Ralph Nader running on a pretty far left platform and getting 10% of the vote. Also Montana, 6% of the vote. So these states are conservative overall, but there are a lot of people who have, especially a lot of people who moved there for environmental reasons, for the amenity values, who are associated with a fairly far left position on the political spectrum. Whereas in the Southeast, Georgia, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, very, very few votes for Nader indeed. Let me quickly go through the county level maps of this same sort of, the same years. Go back to 76, Carter and Ford. You can see the great swath of blue again in the South. Some in New England, but mostly in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Actually, most of Connecticut not going for the Democratic candidate. You can see large cities, and you can see the north of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and basically a sort of, again, the central swath through Iowa down into Arkansas and Louisiana. A lot of counties in Texas, scattered counties. We can flip through. The next year, you can see massive losses for Carter, especially in the West. West going very, very strongly for Reagan in 1980. You can see some very dark counties in Nebraska and Kansas, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah. In the Northeast, with the exception of northern Minnesota and Wisconsin, just scattered counties. Some of the heavy industrial counties in western Pennsylvania, mining counties in West Virginia, some of the urban counties, big cities, New York, mining counties in the anthracite belt of Pennsylvania, but by and large not doing well at all outside of a southern base. And then with Mondale, you can see the Democratic support dropping down, losing almost all of the South. And the counties that he did win are mostly African-American majority counties here, the Black Belt along the Mississippi, Hispanic majority counties in South Texas and northern New Mexico, just a few counties in California, just a few in Washington, some urban and industrial counties in the Northeast, a few agricultural counties in Minnesota and Iowa, but not many at all. 88 with Dukakis, there's definitely a pickup of votes, very similar patterns. You can see doing much better in Iowa. Iowa's a really interesting state. We'll talk about it later on. The only predominantly agricultural or farm state that has, over the last couple decades, often voted for the Democratic Party, and it really looks like it's going to do so again this year. So you can see a pickup of many different areas, but it's still a map that's predominantly red. 1992, with Bill Clinton's first victory, the green are counties that Bill Clinton won, but won with less than 40%. So you can see when you got that third party, the Ross Perot party, that really throws things off. You can also see a few counties that Perot won in northern Maine. That's the purple there. Actually, Trinity County in California. A few others in the West, a few in Texas. You can see Clinton just winning states like Montana and Nevada with less than 40%. That's, again, because Perot did very well in these states and essentially through the state-level election. You can see places like Indiana voting very heavily for the Republican candidate, for George Bush Sr. in this year. You can see some changes, though. You can see New England really shifting towards the Democratic Party. Many areas that previously had been voting Republican. You can see now Northern California, a coastal strip. A lot of counties like Marin, San Mateo, Santa Clara that had been mostly voting Republican have now switched to the Democratic ticket. So that's something that we're going to see a continuation of. In 1996, Clinton against Dole. Again, you can see some similar patterns, but notice how Clinton now is dominating in the Northeast, including most of the counties in New York, most of the counties in Michigan as well, not doing very well in Indiana. In the South, it's very scattered. Democrats doing very poorly in the Great Plains, but Democrats doing much better in the West, places like Colorado and certainly in the Pacific Coast. But then in 2000, with Al Gore, again, a drop of Democratic support at the county level. You can see in places like New York, counties moving in the Republican direction. Same thing in Michigan and in Wisconsin. We can see more of a sort of a narrowing of the Democratic terrain. And then 2004, pretty similar map. What's interesting is you can switch back and forth from some of these maps. And notice there's not much difference at the county level between these two. And that's not true in any of the others. Any of the others, we go back between 96 and 2000, you can see big differences. Or we go back between 88 and 92, we can see big differences. But 2000, 2004, not much change. George Bush getting higher percentage in these really conservative areas like Nebraska, many parts of Kansas and Utah, but at the county level, pretty similar. So that's certainly something I'm going to be watching very closely, is to see what happens now. See what sort of gains at the county level, well, if any, are going to be made by Barack Obama. So we'll talk about that, obviously, next week. Let's focus in, though, on 2004, and let's look at some individual regions and states. First point I want to make is just showing the western half of the country, and I want to focus in on this very Republican core of the West, with some exceptions. I think I talked about exceptions. Blaine County, Idaho, that's Sun Valley ski resort country. Same thing with Teton County, there's Jackson Hole. You get up to Missoula, Montana, that's the University of Montana. This is Butte, which is a mining town, which still has strong labor union heritage. We got American Indian reservations here and here. But otherwise, we go into this sort of core zone, Utah, western part of Colorado, most of Wyoming, most of Idaho, southeastern Oregon, up to places like Modoc and Lassen County, California. Very, very heavily Republican voting areas. And there's a couple things here, sort of reasons for it. In places, again, like these counties in northern Nevada, southeastern Oregon, very sparsely populated, ranch country, cowboy country, grazing country, a real movement by voters against the Democratic Party because they associated the Democrats with environmental constraints. These are the places where almost all the land is owned by the federal government. It's owned by it's controlled by the Bureau of Land Management, which in the 80s started putting more restrictions on grazing for environmental reasons, and that really turned these counties away from the Democratic Party towards the Republican Party. They're sparsely populated, not many people. Much more population when we get over here, Utah, southeastern Idaho, and here we can find a close correlation with religion. Showing leading church bodies, and the brown here, the leading church body, is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as the Mormon Church. And in the counties with the dark circles, more than 50% of that county's population belongs to the given church. So you can see it's not just Utah by any means. It's the eastern part of Idaho, parts of Wyoming as well, and even going into parts of western Colorado and some counties in Nevada as well. So especially those areas with those dots. Now, of course, not everyone in the Mormon Church is a Republican. Harry Reid of Nevada is a Mormon and is the majority leader in the Senate. But overall, of all the religious groups, it is probably, well, certainly one of the most Republican-leaning. No doubt about that. So there is a correlation between Republican voting now and membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it's pretty easy to explain that very heavy Republican pattern. There are, though, some exceptions. The color's actually a little bit washed out on this map. I tried to fix them, but you can find a county here in eastern Utah that just barely went for the Republican Party. And if we go back much farther back, we find this county actually was very strongly Democratic voting in many years. So now it's just barely Republican. And to explain this, I'm going to turn to some maps of ancestry. Here's a map showing persons of Greek ancestry per 1,000 population. And there in the darkest category is that county. Persons of Italian ancestry in the darkest category, there's that county. And persons of Yugoslavian, well, basically Serbian, Croatian, or Slovenian, in the second darkest category, that same county. What's going on here? If I give you the name of the county, you'd probably be able to tell. It's Carbon County, Utah. When you hear Carbon County, you know it's going to be a coal mining county. And coal mining was conducted largely by immigrants from eastern and southern Utah. So even though the Mormons are the largest church here, there's a lot of Eastern Orthodox, there's a lot of Roman Catholics in this county. Miners were heavily unionized. This is underground, deep coal mining. It has lost its democratic flavor, but barely. Also, same with Sweetwater County, Wyoming. That's another coal mining county that used to vote Democratic and is not as Republican as neighboring counties, but last few elections hasn't been in that camp. And at any time, if anyone has questions or comments, please feel free to add them, because what I'd like to do now is go through some state-by-state examples and look at the voting patterns at the county level and talk about what some of the differences are. And in each one, I've paired a population density map from the Wikipedia with the state maps from Dave Leap's tremendous atlas of U.S. Presidential elections, having had to go through and switch red to blue on all of his maps because, as I mentioned before, he started doing this before the New York Times, and so he uses the opposite color scheme. Certainly my son told me, no, you cannot show these with inverted colors. Everyone will be terribly, terribly confused. Well, you can certainly see the great concentration of population around Seattle and Tacoma, a second one in Spokane, and a few others as well. What we don't see is the Cascade Mountains, and that's the big divide in Washington between the largely Democratic and much wetter West and the drier and much more Republican East. You can see on the Republican side even some of the more urban areas like Spokane voting for George Bush. Certainly the Tri-Cities area, Kennewick, Pasco zone, there's a big atomic energy facility here. It tends to be very conservative country. And again, the colors are somewhat washed out, but if you could see on my own computer, you would see these counties here much darker red than, say, Spokane County over there. The West, largely Democratic. Many areas like King County, where Seattle is very heavily Democratic. Interesting to compare Seattle here with Tacoma here. So there's Tacoma, here's Seattle. And it used to be that Tacoma, which is the more blue-collar industrial town, that used to be the more Democratic voting area. Seattle was leaning Democratic, but not as strongly. Now it's reversed. They still both vote for the Democratic presidential candidates, but Seattle now much more than Tacoma, which is interesting. There are a few exceptions in the West, tend to be more rural counties. Skagit County here, Lewis County, Centralia. I don't really understand why its voting pattern is more like Eastern Washington than Western Washington. But what I can talk about with a little more detail is Clark County down here, which is the city of Vancouver, Washington, a suburb of Seattle, essentially. I'm sorry, Portland, sorry, thank you for that. A suburb of Portland, which is right down here in Multnomah County, just to the south. And again, I'm just speculating here, but if one really doesn't like taxes, Vancouver, Washington is a good place to live because you can shop in Oregon where there's no sales tax, and you live in Washington where there's no state income tax. So for those who want to avoid both income tax and sales tax, there's some places you can do it, and this is one. So that's why, I suspect why Vancouver, Washington is, unlike most of the rest of Western Washington, a very Republican voting area. We can see this is Whitman County here. It's Republican voting, but not as much. Well, that's where Washington State University is. That may have something to do with it. Usually university towns are Democratic voting, or at least not as Republican as neighboring counties, which is interesting. Oregon, a blue state, but boy, it is at the county level, it's a state of red counties. Most counties in Oregon are quite strongly Republican voting. The state as a whole tends to go for the Democratic Party, partly because the population is so concentrated in Portland, greater Portland, and the Willamette Valley. Although, look at the Willamette Valley. Not all of the Willamette Valley is Democratic voting by any means. It's Multnomah County, where Portland is. That's a very, very deep shade of blue. You can't see it that well. Washington County, where Hillsborough is, Clatsop County with Astoria. Certainly, these are Democratic voting counties. But you go into the southern suburbs of Portland, places like Oregon City, you're getting into Republican voting areas. That's true in Salem. You go down to Albany, Lynn County. I believe that's actually very heavily Republican voting. And Oregon, from its very beginning, has had this real sort of political duality. There were streams of migrants who came in from New England, who are originally associated with the Republicans, and migrants from the South who are associated with the Democrats. And there's been a switch, but you can still see some of the patterns that may go back to early settlement. With Lane County here, we have Eugene, University of Oregon. Benson County over here, we have Corvallis, Oregon State. So again, we see the university towns pretty strongly voting for the Democratic Party. Fast-growing cities like Bend, places like Ashland and Medford, Grants Pass down here. A lot of people cashing out from California, selling their houses in the Bay Area, moving up into these areas. So they're, especially Bend, growing very, very fast. The counties where Bend is here, Ashland, not as deeply red as a lot of the other ones in Oregon, but still in the Republican category. Klamath Falls here, that's very, very Republican. That's an area with big water issues. It's a farming area. The U.S. Government has recently restricted farmers' use of water to save salmon population, and that's certainly associated with a very strong Republican voting patterns. So, and anywhere in eastern Oregon, again, very Republican, but not many people in eastern Oregon, as you can see from that map. Very, very strong patterns here. I've talked a bit about California before, so I'm not going to belabor it. But some of the points I will make is that a big difference between Northern California and Southern California. We have Los Angeles County and Santa Barbara County voting for Kerry. Also Imperial, though this Imperial is very poor Hispanic, definitely majority Hispanic, and that would explain that. A lot of these counties have large numbers of Hispanics, but a lot of them are fairly recent immigrants who are not voting, but Imperial has had a Hispanic majority for a long time, and so you get heavy Hispanic voting. But the suburban counties of Los Angeles, Ventura County, Orange County, the area known as the Inland Empire in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, San Diego County, still voting Republican. Not quite as strongly as they were before. Orange County used to have these very heavy Republican voting patterns. It's changing. Actually, partly from Hispanic immigration again. Santa Ana, I believe, is now predominantly Hispanic. So there have been some shifts. But you still have this outer suburban pattern of Republican voting. You don't have that in the Bay Area at all. You used to, but it's gone now. And it's interesting, it's sort of thing, what other major cities do you not have affluent suburbs that are still voting for the Republican Party? It would be Boston, Seattle, and San Francisco really are the only ones that I can think of. Even in New York, as we'll see later on, a lot of the wealthy suburban counties are Republican voting, or they were in 2004. We'll see what 2008 brings. I think there'll be some differences. As far as some rural counties, I talked about Mono County and Alpine, very, very tiny populations, people who've moved there for the natural amenities. That's pretty easy to explain. What maybe are more interesting are Humboldt County and Mendocino County over here, which are medium to light population density. outside, really, of the metropolitan area of the Bay Area. Counties that have a lot of loggers, and in many places where we have lots of highly timber-dependent counties, we've seen a switch to the Republicans because of environmental issues. But you have other things going on in Mendocino and Humboldt counties. You've had a lot of people who left the Bay Area back in the late 60s and 70s. So you find a lot of elderly hippies and not so elderly hippies. You end up with a very interesting sort of left libertarian political culture. I've had some good friends in Mendocino County, and it's a very different place. It's a place where both the county sheriff and the district attorney say they don't care if you cultivate marijuana plants as long as you don't grow too many. In fact, they just had a ballot issue on whether you should be allowed 25 or 6 plants with no problem. And actually, they dropped it down to 6 because a lot of people just said it's just too open. People are growing in their backyard in Ukiah, and so they did drop it down. But it's also a county that has this no grading ordinance. You can bulldoze at will. So it's a sort of place where you go to build a house, and people say, building permit? You know, why would you get a building permit? It's just build. In the rural areas anyway. So a different political culture, but very heavily voting for the Democratic candidates. Yes. Okay, he's saying Mendocino County, very left voting people with guns. Oh yes, I've witnessed that as well. So you get, there's been actually sort of there was real tension in the 70s and 80s between the sort of old redneck families, if you will, and the hippies who came up. But that's all over now. There's been sort of a meeting in the middle on some issues, and there's not nearly the tension that there used to be. So yes, certainly not politically very distinctive from the Bay Area. Yes? Okay, that's interesting. So the question is, coal mining areas traditionally having tended to vote Democratic, although that is changing, whereas places like Hanford, Tri-Cities area in Washington, Republican voting. I think it has to do with unionization. So also there were many more coal miners, many more blue-collar workers, certainly traditionally with relatively low levels of education. Coal mining used to be very labor-intensive. That's one of the problems in places like West Virginia, where they've moved away from underground mining, which is labor-intensive, to the strip mining, which is capital intensive, and a lot of people have lost their jobs because of that. But it certainly used the old regime, if you will. Coal mining areas had lots of laborers, and they were fairly heavily unionized, and still union membership correlates even today with Democratic voting. Not as much as it did back in the 50s and in earlier generations, but it still does to some degree. Whereas nuclear industry, much less labor intensive, much newer, not having that kind of unionization. So that's a good point. Yes, another question? The question is counties in the West swinging because of things like water rights issues. The biggest issue, I just suppose, is the general move towards cultural conservatism in the Republican Party. Although the West isn't like the South. You don't get the real, except in the Mormon area, you don't get the real high levels of religiosity. Probably the biggest thing has been the Democratic Party's embrace of environmentalism, which in many rural areas still doesn't sell as well. You have people who are heavily devoted to off-road vehicles, to sort of mechanized outdoor recreation, hunting, ranchers, grazing, loggers, and these sorts of jobs, which they've associated the Democratic Party with environmental restrictions on those sorts of activities. So that's probably been the biggest issue, I would say. It's not nearly as hot button an issue now as it was 10 years or so ago, partly because a lot of the jobs in many areas are gone. I mean, back to Mendocino County, Fort Bragg used to have a gargantuan lumber mill. If anyone's been up there, it's all shut down now. It's this beautiful prime real estate right on the coast, and there's big toxic waste problems, and so they don't know exactly how to handle that. But you get counties then like Mendocino moving towards tourism, wineries. In the case of Mendocino, the underground marijuana economy certainly is vastly important. And that is associated with a different kind. But those are only in limited areas. Not every place is going to have that. So you get, again, you can see Alpine County. We're talking about sort of natural amenity voters here rather than the more traditional ranchers and those sorts of people. Yes?
Before you leave the West Coast, Alaska did such a complete flip-flop from 96 to 2000. And prior to that, it was Republican like 2000. Then in the Clinton, it went completely the other way, apparently. Do you have that by county?
Yeah, actually, Alaska really doesn't have counties. What are the boroughs they have? Although they're pretty similar. Dave Leap's tremendous atlas, it does not show Alaska level data for a lot of these years, so I don't have it. What you would see are in the northern and western areas, which are heavily Native American, you're going to see high levels of Democratic voting. And in the central area from Fairbanks down to Anchorage and the Seward Peninsula, more Republican, but with a real strong libertarian edge, and also, as we saw in that 10% Native vote, a pretty large number of people on the left of the political spectrum. So Alaska, and then we have Hawaii often gets ignored as well, but it's probably the most reliably Democratic voting state right now, or at least right up there. Hawaii, a state with predominantly Asian American population, which makes it quite distinctive as well. Was there a comment?
That was my question about Hawaii. I noticed that it only went for the Republicans in 1984.
Right, that landslide year, Hawaii went for the Republicans that year, but just about every other year, yes, going. And this year, Obama's polling well over 60% in Hawaii. Hawaii, very, very distinctive, and the biggest thing, I think, is the fact that the white population's a minority, mostly Asian American, and quite a sizable Native Hawaiian population as well. That's tends to be very strongly Democratic voting. We do have some other Western states to look at. Yes, I'm sorry. One thing I wanted to mention about California. If you look at the Bay Area, so if you could go to the greater Bay Area, Sacramento voting for Kerry, but just barely. Then you get down to San Joaquin County, Stockton, Modesto, which is Stanislaus County, Merced County, voting for George Bush. That's sort of the outer suburban fringe. Lots of growth there, and I just want to mention that's the foreclosure capital. This is actually from a year ago, so this is the early foreclosure boom, if you will. And you can see San Bernardino County, Riverside County, San Diego County, and then you can see that belt there as well. What you're basically seeing here is a lot of fast-growing suburban areas. You can look at Florida, look at Atlanta, Dallas, show up really strongly on that map. Be interesting to do a sort of a better comparison. Colorado. Now, Colorado is crucial. I'd say if you want to look at places where we've really had a shift from 2004 to right now. Now, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but if we can trust the polls, and I know there's a lot of problem with trusting the polls, but to the extent that the polls can be trusted, the two most important states that seem to be shifting from the Republican to the Democratic slate would be Colorado and Virginia. So the area around sort of metropolitan Denver, a really crucial place to look. Colorado has gone back and forth a few times, but it hasn't gone for a Democratic candidate since Bill Clinton in 1992. He lost it in 96. Colorado is unlike a lot of other Republican-leaning states in that it has a very high levels of education. It also has a lot of people who've moved there for the natural amenities, who tend to be more on the Democratic side. It also has some very strongly conservative areas. And it has, I can pair this with a map of the topography. Certainly the Great Plains, the flat area in the east, very Republican voting. The sort of high desert plateau area of the far west with a lot of Mormons tends to be very Republican voting. It's along the Front Range where you have the big cities from Fort Collins down through Boulder, Denver, down to Colorado Springs. The that is the crucial battleground area. In the mountains, you have a lot of small counties. A lot of these have very low populations, but they go back to the mining days. Some of those lost population after the mines closed down and have been reborn as ski resorts, mountain areas, again, natural amenity zones, and they tend to be very democratic voting. So you can see there's not many people here, but you have a county like Pitkin County right here. You can't see it there, but it's a very, very dark blue. That's where Aspen is. San Miguel County, even more so. That's Telluride. And actually, you can go through these counties and pick out the ski resorts. And a lot of it, I think, is a lot of the really wealthy people who ski there probably aren't voting there, but the young ski bums who go in there, they're probably more likely to be registering and voting. A series of counties in the far south, very heavily Democratic voting. These are Hispanic counties, and have been Hispanic counties for several hundred years. And I'll show you a map of that later on. So that's understandable. This is Pueblo County. Pueblo, Colorado is unusual in that it's an industrial city in the middle of the West. A steel city, has been in decline, heavily unionized labor force. Go north into El Paso County, Colorado Springs, Republican voting, but actually not as dark red as I suspected. Colorado Springs, very well known as a Republican stronghold. It has the Air Force Academy, and it's also the center of Focus on the Family, Reverend James Dobson's fundamentalist Christian organization, very conservative, very Republican leaning. So certainly Colorado Springs can be expected to vote Republican, but like I say, it's not as dark red as a lot of other counties around it. It may be changing. Boulder County, deep, deep blue, University of Colorado, no surprise. The Denver suburb, well, here's Denver. It's a separate county. Adams County, Democratic voting. Arapahoe County, Republican. Jefferson County, Republican. But the wealthier suburbs of Denver were Republican voting. But again, it looks like there's going to be a shift in this election if the polls can be trusted. A lot of these red counties here are going to turn blue, and that could have major consequences for the election. Yes? Yeah, okay, so Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who had shifted parties. Can you explain a little bit more about what?
I don't remember, but I remember it was very controversial that I think he went from being a Republican to a Democrat. Do you remember?
It was the other way around, was it? Was the other way around, yes. And he has partly Native American in background. Colorado does not have a very large Native American population, unlike a lot of nearby states. Certainly New Mexico, Arizona have very large Native American population. But again, Colorado, it's distinctive because of its high levels of education, but it also has something of this Western, more libertarian twist, I suppose. So anti-tax issues have been pretty big in Colorado in years past. But certainly the McCain-Palin campaign hasn't been doing very well. And McCain really has not seemingly been contesting Colorado all that much. How many trips has he made? Does anyone know? Has anyone been following his schedule? Pardon? He's going there tomorrow. Okay. On his way to Arizona. Colorado. How about New Mexico? Now, New Mexico, the last two elections has been right at the edge, 50-50. Went for Gore, did not go for Kerry. So it's really, it has been a very much a swing state. Like Colorado, it's even more so than Colorado. It's polling for Barack Obama, and it seems almost certain that Obama's going to win quite well. A few interesting things. One is you can see just how concentrated population is in Albuquerque and Bernalillo County, where Albuquerque is voting for the Democrats in 2004, but the suburban counties, to the extent that there are suburban counties here, not. Very heavily American Indian counties. This is Gallup, New Mexico here. This is one of the few counties in the United States. What is that? Is that Roosevelt County? Does anyone know? McKinley County. McKinley County, one of only a few counties where the number one language is not English or Spanish, where most people are speaking Navajo, or actually there's some Pueblo Indian groups here as well. So no surprise that that would be heavily for the Democrats. Also, some of these northern counties, very heavily Democratic voting. Taos County up here, Santa Fe County. You can see Santa Fe, the capital here. This is Las Vegas. The city is Las Vegas, New Mexico over there. And to explain that very heavy Democratic voting area, we can look at Hispanic origin, and you can see how northern New Mexico, a lot of these counties, well over 60%, some are up to 80% Hispanic. And this goes back to the late 1600s. The Spanish thrust up into North America. The major focus was northern New Mexico. When the United States took over this in the Mexican War, there was a very well-established Spanish-speaking population. It's quite economically poor, very strongly Democratic voting. And you can see that the state as a whole. And certainly, George Bush in 2004 and 2000 made a big pitch to Hispanic voters and did pick up some gains. Right now, Hispanics are polling about 2/3 for Barack Obama. And so that's something that really explains this shift in New Mexico. Las Cruces, that's Doña Ana County, also Democratic voting. One county here that is a very small county here, which is interesting. You know that place? That's Los Alamos, Republican voting, which is one of the few counties that has extremely high levels of education that is Republican voting, with major nuclear research facility. Very, I may have the highest percentage of PhDs of any county. I'd have to check that, but it certainly could well be there. Great Plains counties, very Republican voting as well. Okay, let me pause. Oh yeah, question?
Yeah, if you go back to the one before.
New Mexico?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, Hispanic?
No, I'm looking at Texas on that one. There seems to be a very large Hispanic population there, yet Texas at this point is still very strongly Republican.
Yes, so Texas very strongly Republican, although you see a lot of Hispanics. Well, one thing you got with Hispanics, you have to ask, how long has the Hispanic population been there? So many areas in central Texas, it's fairly recent. So people have recently been moving in. A lot of them are not citizens, so they're not voters. South Texas, particularly like northern New Mexico, has been Spanish-speaking since before the United States was founded. It's always been predominantly Spanish-speaking. Some of these counties are over 90% Spanish in the home. They're also relatively poor, and so that area now is solidly Democratic. The only other areas in Texas where in 2004 Democrats won: Travis County, Austin, University, state capital, and I can't remember the county, but that's Beaumont, industrial city, lots of oil refining as well. And it's interesting because Texas had been a real bulwark of the Democratic Party. If we could go back, if you remember, Carter won it in '76, but it's pretty much gone, and it's seen huge growth in the suburbs around Dallas and Houston, San Antonio to some degree, and those suburban areas very, very heavily Republican voting. Now it's interesting what will happen in, wrong way. You can see even in Kansas, in southwestern Kansas, a lot of Hispanics. People have moved there. You might think what they're doing. I'd have to check, and I don't know the name of that county, but I'll bet there's a meat packing plant there because that's generally is the sort of thing that's going to attract Hispanic laborers. But again, they're recent immigrants. They're not voting. How will this area be voting 20 years from now? Well, we don't know, but it'll be an interesting thing to watch. Yeah, the question is about these very established Hispanic areas in northern New Mexico. Overall, the per capita or median household income is still very low. You would have in places like, say, Las Vegas, New Mexico, where most people are Hispanic. Yes, they will be the business owners. A lot of these areas have lost population unless, like Santa Fe and Taos, they can attract wealthier outsiders, and those wealthier outsiders will tend to be Democratic voting anyway. Again, people going for the arts and the natural amenities. Culturally, they tend to be fairly conservative, probably even more so than a lot of other Hispanics. That was one reason why the Republicans thought that they would be able to get the Hispanic vote, because a lot of Hispanics are fairly conservative on cultural issues, on abortion, on gay rights, and these sorts of things. But then the big upsurge of anti-immigrant sentiment within the Republican Party, I think, was the big break there, turning Hispanic voters away. Of course, not all. I think McCain is polling about 33% or so among Hispanic voters. And I don't know about these counties here, but I'd suspect that Barack Obama will do very, very well in those areas. Thanks for the point.
As you would expect with people with a Spanish heritage going back 500 years, as northern New Mexico is, it's also very heavily Catholic.
Yes, very heavily Catholic. Catholics right now, if you take Catholics as a whole, are very much in the middle. Catholics used to be very much identified with the Democratic Party. Now it's about 50-50. And again, a lot of it is, it's going to depend on frequency of attendance of Mass, where the more observant Catholics tend to be more Republican voting now, and the less observant Catholics tend to be more Democratic voting. I don't know what Mass attendance rates are in that area. That would be an interesting thing to look at. Yeah, and one more question?
I'm not sure if it's pertinent, but that southwest corner of Kansas, right there, Lugo, Kansas, around there is the Hugoton gas field. Very heavy production of natural gas there. It feeds up to Detroit and all.
Oh, very interesting. So there's a big natural gas field. Of course, there's a big boom in natural gas right now. That's going to be, again, that's probably why a lot of the Hispanics have moved into that corner of Kansas, is for this burgeoning natural gas industry. You can also even see some Wyoming counties now with large Hispanic population, and that could well be the same thing going on there, because Wyoming's undergoing a huge energy boom. Usually it's going to be, you can see agricultural counties in eastern Washington, major metro areas as well. So thanks for bringing that up. Let's move on to the eastern two-thirds of the country. There's a few things that I want to note on this map. We talked about Austin, Texas here. Otherwise, we can see a sizable area of very heavily Republican voting zone. Nebraska, especially. The only county in Nebraska to have gone for Kerry is an American Indian reservation. Kansas, we do have Lawrence, Kansas, University of Kansas, and we have Kansas City, Kansas, as well as Kansas City, Missouri. Otherwise, there's a very large swath there. Oklahoma, not a single county voting for the Democratic candidate. That was true in Utah. I don't know if it's true. I'd have to check. I'm not sure if there are any other states where that's true. Used to be that southeastern Oklahoma which is the poor part of the state, more American Indian. That used to be very Democratic voting. No more. And actually, I saw a poll today that showed Oklahoma as McCain having the largest lead of any states. Idaho and Utah are right up there as well.
The Indian reservation in Nebraska and South Dakota, they're all very Democratic, but not in Oklahoma.
Well, in Oklahoma, the only major reservation is right there. Otherwise, it was Indian territory, but the Dawes Act in 1887 broke up the Indian territory, or began that process. And American Indians here were given their individual allotments, and then it was opened up to the Sooners, those who came in, well, too soon is where that notion came in from. There was this huge land rush. So that was basically a process of dispossession.
The Indians down there are very wealthy.
So, some of them are.
I was born right in that area, and they had this bad land. It's where the oil.
It's got oil underneath of it. Yes, there are a few American. There are a few American Indian groups that are very well off. So yes.
Thank Andrew Jackson for moving out of that oil.
Yeah. Most Oklahoma Indians aren't particularly well off. But what's the name of the county? I can't remember. Do you know?
Osage.
Osage County, right. It's the Osage Indians, sure. Yeah, and there's a small tribe in Palm Springs, California. There's a few groups that got real estate that ended up being valuable for an unforeseen reason, if you will. You can see this real swath of Democratic voting counties, sort of a discontinuous swath from southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina, central South Carolina, a couple chunks in Georgia, black belt of Oklahoma, actually of Alabama, Mississippi, inland delta of Mississippi into Arkansas and parts of Tennessee, very clearly African American areas associated with these fertile soils where there were big plantations, hence lots of slaves, hence lots of African Americans. Many of these areas have real declining populations now. They tend to be very poor. But if you can pick out those with over 50% here, here, okay, so this would be, well, I'll show you some individual state maps. Those are the maps, the counties we just saw blue in the earlier map. It's a very, very clear population. State like Alabama, white population, overwhelmingly Republican voting now, or at least it has been in recent elections. So that's a clear pattern we'll see. Otherwise, well, I'll talk about these more specific patterns as we get into individual states. And I don't know how many states we'll be able to talk about, but South Dakota was brought up. And I just want to compare the Democratic voting counties and the American Indian reservations. You can see almost perfect correlation, except here. That's I don't know the county, that's Vermilion is the town, University of South Dakota. So again, American Indian populations, university towns. Sioux Falls, that's the big growth area in South Dakota. It's not quite as Republican as some of the other counties. You can't see it all that well here, but it's certainly still Republican. Rapid City, Sturgis, interesting area. You know what Sturgis is famous for? Motorcycle rallies. The Hells, other motorcycle groups have these huge rallies there. That's another sort of growth area, but pretty heavily Republican voting. So and you can certainly see that almost perfect correlation. Yes.
How did George McGovern get elected senator from South Dakota? And they've also had some other pretty liberals.
Yeah, okay, the question. George McGovern, who was probably one of the most liberal candidates ever to run, didn't win South Dakota in the presidential election, won Massachusetts was all. You know, if we go back to the New Deal era, Roosevelt was certainly won both. Well, he won up until, he didn't win in 40. He won in 32 and 36 in South Dakota. So there was some sort of New Deal liberalism. Certainly Roosevelt brought benefits to farm areas. Earlier there had been some prairie populism here. Teddy Roosevelt did extremely well in South Dakota. That was his best state. He had spent time there and was a sort of a local celebrity. But it still is odd that as someone as liberal as McGovern, and I suspect, and I have to look at this, I suspect that he was a much more liberal presidential candidate than he was a senator, and he was probably pretty good at bringing goods from Washington to South Dakota, supporter of farm bills and farm subsidies and the like. I'm just guessing here. Someone may know this better. Fascinating question. Yeah, natural amenity voting pattern. So here you have the Black Hills, which has been growing in population in good part because whereas most of the rest of South Dakota is flat and either farmland or grassland, here you've got mountains and forests. You don't have skiing, so that may be part of it. And the mountain scenery isn't as spectacular as in other areas. So it's maybe more of a local, I don't think you're getting many people from the West Coast or the East. I just don't think it has that kind of a draw. So it's more of a Midwestern catchment, perhaps. I'm just speculating here, but it would seem to make sense to me. Thanks for the questions and comments. Yes, one thing I wanted to mention here, and this is a great map of change in population for counties from 2000 to 2007. Anything in brown here declined, and some of these declined precipitously. And I bring this up here because you can see this very conservative Great Plains belt is a zone of plummeting population. And you can also see some of these northern New Mexico counties as well, declining population. overall, this is something that hits the Republicans and the Democrats. Democratic counties like Wayne County, Detroit, Cook County, Cuyahoga County, where Cleveland is. You can see the Buffalo area. You can see places like the Youngstown area, Pittsburgh, these industrial towns, real population declines. That's hurt the Democrats. Big population gains in the suburban areas around Dallas and Houston, San Antonio, Atlanta, Charlotte, these other areas, which are even Nashville, even Louisville, Kentucky, Indianapolis. That's certainly helped the Republicans. Decline in the Black Belt and the inland delta of the Mississippi and the Black Belt of Alabama and the heavily African-American areas in this part of North Carolina. So you've seen declines there. What's going on here? Well, that's post-Katrina from New Orleans, even from Beaumont and other areas that had just this massive, massive decline. But the Plains is notable. I mean, there are a lot of the counties here that you just wonder if there's going to be anyone left. You know, here we're talking about 19% decline. So I've given you the population decline from 2000 to 2006. These are counties in Nebraska and South Dakota, and then the percentage vote for George Bush. So you can see these are some of the most heavily Republican voting areas, over 90% in some of these areas. But there's not many people there, and there's just, you wonder, is there going to be anyone left in some of these places? Yes, that's a great point, right. The point being made is that low population states have sort of an inordinate weight to their votes because of the Electoral College. Because a state like North Dakota, South Dakota, they have 600, 700,000 people. That means they have one member of the House of Representatives. But they get, and that's based on population, but then they have 2 senators, and they get an electoral vote for every senator and member of the House. So you have Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota with 3 electoral votes. Now, on the Democratic side, you also have Delaware, Vermont, District of Columbia, so there's sort of some balancing. But overall, it is to the Republicans' advantage because even though Nebraska has 5, I believe, but Nebraska also does the odd split. And it is where the majority winner gets the 2 electoral votes for the Senate, but then each House district goes its own way. And it has been speculated that Obama could conceivably get the easternmost congressional district in Nebraska. It doesn't look like it right now, but it's possible. So yes, that's just one of these oddities of the American political system, and it does give extra weight. Of course, in the Senate, it's even more magnified. Yes?
Wouldn't another reason for this disparity in the electoral college be because it's only updated every 10 years with the census, so all these districts are apportioned according to the 2000 census?
That's true. It's updated with the 10-year census, and so there's a lag time, and you can see there's a lot of movement in between. So it takes time to catch up. But what we have really been seeing in the Electoral College is a drop in electoral votes for states like Michigan and a gain in Texas and Florida and Georgia and North Carolina and in these certainly Arizona, the more rapidly growing Sun Belt states. Yeah, one more and then I'll move on because I do have a lot more states I'd like to cover, but we'll see how much time we have. Yes?
Would it be correct to assume that when the population in these areas declines, the remaining population tends to be older?
Absolutely. I could show you a map. The question is older population, and I could show you a map of average age, and a lot of these places have, yes, a very old population. Schools are no longer able to maintain. A lot of the downtowns are virtual ghost towns. What you do have in these plain states, too, it's a congregation of people in the smaller, the more established towns. One geographer said that you can tell if a town is going to survive if it has a Walmart. If it does, then it's going to be a magnet, and a lot of those places are actually growing. But if it's too small for that, forget it. And it's something that neither party has really been doing much to address this issue, and maybe not much could be done. There were some geographers who suggested a while back that they recreate a giant national wildlife refuge and restock it with bison because Otherwise, I mean, there's just no, how can you keep it going? That was not well received in these areas at all. Let's move, oh, yeah, okay.
Just a brief comment also about another part of the country, Pennsylvania. I was there at State for the Penn State for an interview 15 years ago. And of course, the State College area is a good-sized population, but I took a driving tour around the whole surrounding area one day, and there's all these little towns that look like they're just drying up.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was going to show you Pennsylvania, but I can just go right back to that population map. You can see we're not going to get through all of these by any means, are we? It would be fun to do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look at western Pennsylvania and central Pennsylvania. Not true in the east. If you go into the eastern area, that's a growth zone. But central and western New York, you can see these areas are just hemorrhaging population very, very rapidly. And so it's not just the cities; it's a lot of these rural areas as well. And that's it has to do with climate. It has to do with decaying of sort of the economic structures of these areas as well. Let's try to talk about a few other states. Wisconsin has this very interesting east-west divide. We can see Milwaukee, very Democratic voting. And again, you can't see it very well, but these suburban counties, Waukesha, upscale, well-to-do, very, very heavily Republican voting. It's a pattern that we saw in California 30, 40 years ago. It hasn't changed here. We have Madison, Dane County, very Democratic voting, no surprise, university. But then we have smaller towns like La Crosse and Eau Claire, pretty solidly Democratic voting. Up Superior, this area has been very far left, way back from the 1800s, when the shipping, the mining, the loggers were unionized and somewhat radicalized. This is another American Indian reservation. I spent a lot of time thinking, okay, I'm going to find the answer in something like settlement patterns. The yellow is German, the pink is Norwegian. Yeah, the German areas, except for Milwaukee, they tend to be more Republican. The Norwegian area, more Democratic. The reverse in the 1800s. But then we can find some of these counties that are actually more German in their vote. And that doesn't fit the pattern. So I'm not going to go very far with that. And I don't know how to explain that east-west divide. Yes? So yeah, it has to do with the tradition of socialism in those areas. Yeah, eventually Norway and Sweden did become social democratic, we might say, but not when the immigrants were coming in. The immigrant groups most associated with socialism were some Germans. The Germans were large enough to have everything, Jews and Finns, and a lot of Finns up here, and they were very clearly associated with socialism, and that's an interesting thing. I don't know how far back that goes. One thing I would note in Wisconsin, though, again, it's not just these suburban areas, but also the Fox River Valley up here, Green Bay, Appleton, Oshkosh, that area. Paper industry, toilet paper capital of the country. That was Joe McCarthy territory in the 50s. Still today, very Republican voting. I can't explain it. Wisconsin has been going Democratic recently, but just barely in 2004. It looks a lot more solid now. Minnesota used to be probably the most solidly Democratic state. Went Democratic in 84 when it was the only state that did so. Today, it's been trending more Republican. Popular Republican governor. We have a very interesting pattern. The far north up here, here's Duluth, very heavily Swedish and Finnish, a lot of labor radicalism here, both in shipping and mining. This is the Iron Range up here. And that's been left for well over 100 years. The Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, that's what, Hennepin County and Ramsey County. Those have been Democratic. It used to be St. Paul was the more blue-collar town, and it was more Democratic. But these outer suburbs, you can't see it very well, but they are heavily, heavily Republican now. Some of these farm counties are a big mystery to me. If you go back 20 years ago, most of these farm counties were voting for people like Dukakis. like I say, they've been moving Republican, but not all of them. Let's see, that's a very heavy Democratic county. That's Austin, Spam City, USA, Hormel Factory, meat packing. Olmsted County here, that's the Mayo Clinic. Again, highly educated. In the West, in California, New York would associate those areas with the Democratic Party, not in Minnesota. And here's one way you can really see the difference. Take a look at the 6th Congressional District. Here's Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's these fast-growing, relatively wealthy suburban counties. St. Cloud, that's an old German settlement area, a lot of anti-abortion politics here. And Michelle Bachmann, one of the more conservative candidates, she was in the news recently when she talked about the pro-American and anti-American areas of the country. Right next door is Keith Ellison from the 5th District, African-American and Muslim member of Congress. So you go, in other words, from the cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, out to the suburbs, you go to a very different world indeed. Minnesota has been trending Republican right now, and was a state that McCain thought he could pick off. And it's one of the few states, I think, where McCain has put more money into it than Obama has. But its polls now show Obama clearly well ahead. Here was something, and trying to figure out some of these oddities, like why these counties here, small, agricultural, almost all white, Big Stone County here, for example, or some of these counties down here, why Democratic voting? And we go across the border into Iowa, we'll see lots of farm counties in Iowa, Democratic voting. Why would that be when farm counties tend elsewhere not to be? And I was looking at, okay, this has to do with what brand of Lutheranism they practice. The Evangelical Lutheran Church, that's the liberal Lutheran Church. That's the theologically and socially liberal. And yeah, you can see concentration here, a lot there, compared to the Missouri Synod, which is the conservative Lutheran branch, the fundamentalist branch. We can see many more in Nebraska. But actually, that's that county I was just talking about, Big Stone County, Democratic voting, mostly conservative Lutheran. So no, I'm just sort of playing around with these ideas. I don't want to spend too much time in Iowa because I want to get out of the Midwest. But as I said before, it is interesting that it has a lot of the more urban areas. There's Des Moines, Democratic voting, Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Dubuque. They're all Democratic voting. But a lot of the farm counties are Democratic voting too, although barely. Really, this is a real purple area. The only really red area, I don't know if you can see it, is the far corner up here, far northeast, Sioux County, for example. There we can really find a clear ethnic correlation. Counties heavily settled by people from the Netherlands, Dutch counties, even though the Netherlands is one of the most liberal countries in the world, Dutch areas in America tend to be very Republican. And I think it's connected with the Dutch Reformed Church and a certain brand of sort of Calvinist Christianity. These counties here, this part of Michigan, if we have time, we'll see that, very heavily Republican voting. So there is some correlation here. Yes, Iowa and ethanol. I should have brought that up. Thank you.
But isn't that going to convert a lot of these people over?
In Iowa, ethanol subsidies would convert them in what way?
To be more Republican.
Yeah, well,
To be more Democratic.
well, John McCain did not make the ethanol pledge, right?
Obama.
And Obama did. And that really cost McCain support in Iowa. So Iowa went in the last election for Bush. Right now, Obama has a commanding lead in Iowa, and there is probably a connection there. But it is interesting. You can go from this Sioux County and some of these other counties over there. Economically, they look just the same. It's all corn and soybeans, but yet they can vote very differently. And And I don't want to say this is the explanation. I'm just trying to find any sort of correlation I can. Let's move into the South. Arkansas is interesting. It has a Democratic governor. I think it has 2 Democratic senators, although very blue dog Democrats, very sort of conservative Democrats. It has voted more Democratic than a lot of other southern states. It has some interesting geography. The most Republican area is up here, Benton County. Anyone know what's going on up there? That's Walmart country. That's where Walmart is headquartered. Fort Smith, pretty Republican as well. Pulaski County, Little Rock, that's has been voting for Democrats. Most of these counties over here are predominantly African American, so I can explain it. But I get up to a county like that, Clay County, and I don't understand what's going on here. Rural county, 17,000 people, 98% white. Dry county, no alcohol here. Median household income, 25,000. That's about half of the nation's average. Two leading churches are Southern Baptist and Church of Christ, both fundamentalist evangelical churches. It has a 60% religious adherence rate, which is pretty typical, and voted 54% for Kerry. And there are a number of counties in this general area. It'd be fascinating to go to a place like this and try to understand why is it so different from other states with the same demographic features that vote in a very different way. I don't know. So it could just be the local Democratic Central Committee in that county has a tight organization that's a holdover from the days when all of Arkansas was Democratic voting. And in some county, counties mean a lot. I think that we often, in metropolitan areas, we don't see how important they can be in rural areas. But yeah, I think that's a great point. It could well be something like that. It is interesting, though, that there are a number of other counties in the same area that have the same characteristics. And there's some in Tennessee and a few other places as well. Here's Tennessee. You can see, so here's what's interesting to note. Here's Nashville, Davidson County, Democratic voting, suburbs, heavily Republican. Here's Memphis over here, Democratic voting. The outer fringe Republican voting. Eastern Tennessee, cities like Chattanooga and Knoxville, very Republican voting, even in the cities. And this goes way back. This is an area that when the Democrats and Republicans did their geographical switch, didn't happen here. It's been Republican voting since right after the Civil War. No plantations here. They really dislike the plantation culture of the center and especially the far west. And it's maintained this Republican voting pattern. And again, even you can get up into a place like Oak Ridge, again, high levels of education, but also Republican. But we can find counties, a number of counties up here that are the same as we saw. Stewart County, small, white, poor, fundamentalist. George Wallace had a plurality here in '68, yet voting for Kerry. Not by a huge margin, but a lot of nearby counties with the same demographic characteristics, you'd have Kerry being crushed. So what's the difference? How about Kentucky? Boy, Kentucky, very strongly Republican. You can see Louisville voting for the Kerry. Not so Covington and the Cincinnati suburbs. Not so Lexington and the Bluegrass area. That's Republican voting. You get into Appalachia, and you get some, again, really bizarre patterns where we can go from a couple of counties here. Elliott County, I've mentioned, and I've shown here, in Jackson counties. Let's compare them. Let's jump ahead. So here is Elliott County here, Jackson County here. Elliott County, which voted 70% for Kerry, and Jackson County that voted 84% for Bush, and they look just exactly the same. Small population, all white virtually, poor, very poor. Fundamentalist but low religious adherence rate. Lots of Appalachia actually has low religious adherence rates, which I think surprise a lot of people. Many of these areas, the people who do go to church go to Pentecostal or fundamentalist churches, but many don't go to church at all. Yes? I think it could well have to do with the legacy of feuding, because this is an area that is the most famous for feuds in the United States. Settled by Scots-Irish, border Scots, they tended to have a very sort of somewhat politically egalitarian culture, but also high levels of isolation. The topography here is incredibly rugged, and often you had virtual wars between counties. That may have had something to do with it. A lot of these patterns are long-standing. I thought I could get it with something like unionization and coal, but here's our two counties here. They're both outside of the coal belt. So I could explain some of these coal counties in West Virginia voting for the Democrats. Doesn't work in Kentucky. So they're outside of the coal belt. They're both very poor. Here's a median household income, and you can see this zone here. This is one of the poorest parts of the country. Certainly for a white majority area, it is the poorest part of the country. And maybe under the Johnson administration, there was a lot of money put into Appalachia. Maybe in some of these counties, there were more active programs. Again, you'd have to get down at the county level and do the research. I don't think anyone's doing this kind of work. Most people don't find this sort of county level stuff interesting. They'd say, there's 6,000 people in this county, who cares? Right? They're not going to swing an election. But I just find it interesting. Yes? Yes. The minority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, he's having a tough race. He may not win. That's an interesting point. And it'll be really interesting to see how Kentucky swings. West Virginia, I won't spend much time here, but these are heavy coal mining counties. Here's West Virginia, which had been this very Democratic voting state that's shifted into the Republican lineup. A lot of this has to do with coal. Certainly, Al Gore was not well liked here. Strong environmentalist platform. Doesn't sell very well in coal country. But still, a lot of the coal mining counties down here are going for the Democrats, went for Kerry. The larger urban areas, Charleston, places like Huntington and what is that, Parkersville? Who knows West Virginia? Even Wheeling actually going for the Republicans. Even Morgantown, where the university is, going for the Republicans. Fairmont over here, a little bit of high tech there. It went Democratic. But here's one state that has really shifted from the Democratic to the Republican side. Georgia, very important state because of the vast sprawl of Atlanta. And you can see Fulton County, which is central Atlanta. Very large African-American population, Democratic voting. DeKalb County over here. There are a few African-American suburban middle-class counties. That's one of them. Prince George's, Maryland would be another. They tend to be very Democratic voting. These are mostly African-American counties here. African-American counties over there as well. What you can't see on this map is how dark red a lot of these suburban fringe counties are. And if you look at a chart like this, this shows the fastest growing counties over since 2000 by percentage growth, and percent Bush vote. And you can see 4 counties in suburban Atlanta that fill this category. Forsyth County, northeast of Atlanta, 83%. These tend to be relatively affluent, relatively white counties, and very, very fast growing. And as I think I mentioned before, I went through the top 30 counties in terms of the fastest growing by percent, and I didn't find one that went for Kerry. And I stopped at that point. So certainly these fast growing suburban counties across how will it be in this next election? That will be very interesting to see. Certainly, some people have said that, some pollsters have said that Georgia might be in play. North Carolina, well, we can see places like Durham and Orange County. That's Chapel Hill, university towns. Charlotte, big banking center. Now with the financial crash, the fact that North Carolina is now, by some measures, the second most important banking center in the country. One reason why North Carolina is now in play, and our latest poll put Obama a couple percentage points ahead. It has been largely the African-American and university towns. You can't see it on the map, but there's a real strong Republican vote in this area here. And it correlates with something.
Marine Corps.
What it correlates with is military. Yes, Marine Corps. You can see Cherry Point Marine Corps Air Station, Camp Lejeune, New River Marine Corps, and so on. And just like university towns, you can peg on the Democratic side military areas. Pensacola, Florida would be another. To some extent, even San Diego, heavily Republican voting. So you can see some pretty good correlations in those areas. Check the time here. Virginia could could be key. Oh, really interesting thing about Virginia, you can see it on the map. In Virginia, all the cities are not part of counties. Every incorporated city is an entity unto itself and is treated in election data as if it were a county. So you can see a city level here that you can't see otherwise. And you can see a place like Roanoke, the city going for Kerry, and the county going for Bush. Danville, it's the same. Here's Richmond, the city, yes, going, but all of the county, which is where most of the people live, going for Bush. You can see University of Virginia here. Big population concentration in the Hampton Roads area, Virginia Beach, Newport News. Some of the city cores, yes, going for Kerry. Most of the counties certainly going for Bush. Real key area is Northern Virginia, where there has been a major change. It used to be that the D.C. suburbs in Maryland were Democratic voting. The D.C. suburbs in Virginia were Republican voting. That's really changed. So in this map, we have Fairfax County, Arlington, and Alexandria going for Kerry. Loudoun County, Prince William County going for Bush. This is probably going to be another change. Actually, I've heard people say the election could be decided in Prince William County. Well, that's an exaggeration, but there's been a real transformation here in Northern Virginia over the last 4 years and even before that. Remember, Virginia hasn't gone for a Democratic candidate since 1964. It was one of the most solid Republican voting states, and it's really changed. We want to get out of the South. Should I talk about, here's Prince George's County, dark, dark blue, African-American middle-class county. Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Maryland, very clearly Democratic voting, but it's a real swath here. But let's get out. Oh, here we go. Stay in the South, I guess, with Florida. You can see a real difference between the Gulf Coast, places like Tampa, and the Atlantic Coast, Miami, Broward County with Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach County, Orlando, actually Orange County, that went for Kerry, this is Daytona Beach, Gainesville University, Tallahassee University, and state government. One thing that's interesting to note with Palm Beach County, Jewish population, certainly one of the largest Jewish populations in the United States. Jewish population, I think it's polling about 75% now for Obama. There was a lot of speculation that there'd be a higher vote for McCain having to do with Israel issue. That is not happening. You have a fairly elderly population as well, but it certainly looks like it's going to go very strongly. And of course, Florida is going to be a real key area. Should I do some more here? What time? I don't have a watch, I'm sorry, so I'm relying on my cell phone here. So we got 20 more minutes. I do want to have time for general conversation. Of course, we got a lot of other states I haven't talked about. New York's pretty interesting. You know, you can go through the cities. You can go Buffalo and Niagara and Rochester and Syracuse. Again, what do we have here? Ithaca, Cornell University, Binghamton, another university town. We've got Albany and Troy and Schenectady over here. Rural counties in the far north, that's distinctive. A lot of people here are French-Canadian background. There may be a correlation here. In New York City, we can see Staten Island having gone Republican. New York, the counties are smaller than the city, so you have 5 counties in one city. So you can get real detailed information. But a place like New York County, Manhattan, that's about 85% Democratic voting recently. Westchester County, if you go back a few generations ago, that was very Republican. Now it's shifted. Not so Rockland County or Putnam County or Sullivan County here. They have some interesting characteristics. Anyone know this area? Actually, Rockland County and Sullivan County are also very heavily Jewish. Where's our you can see it over. That's the Catskill Mountains. That's the old Borscht Belt up there in Sullivan County. There's Rockland County there. And of course, in New York City itself, heavily Jewish, and there the vote very heavily Democratic. But in these suburban and Rockland County, 33% Jewish population, Republican, some of the more conservative Jewish population has moved out there. Especially a lot of the ultra-Orthodox have moved out into those areas. Putnam County over there, very heavily Italian-American. But it's again a difference where we have affluent suburban counties, Republican voting still in New York. Now, what other states? Okay, I'll do one more state. I'll do New Jersey, and then I'll open it up. Oh, I got Ohio and Pennsylvania too. I could get into them if you want to do them. You can see the sort of the area between suburban Philadelphia over here, through Trenton and Princeton, then up into the suburbs of New York, Democratic voting. But again, we've got wealthy suburban counties here that are Republican voting. And in fact, this was interesting. The highest per capita income counties, so I took the richest counties in the country, it's not medium household, but per capita, and the percent carry vote in 2004, so going from Marin County, California, 74%. There's Manhattan, 82%. That's Aspen, Pitkin County. Fairfield, Connecticut, that would be in the New York suburbs. Teton, here's Jackson. And then we get into these wealthy counties in New Jersey. Somerset, Morris, Hunterdon, still Republican voting. And again, I'm going to be real interested to see where those counties go in this election. Arlington, Virginia, 68% for Cary. Fairfax, Westchester, New York. Here's San Mateo County. So these are the most sort of upscale counties, mostly suburban, although a couple like Pitkin and Teton obviously not, but they tend to be Democratic voting these days. Pennsylvania, someone wanted to see it, so yeah, we can talk about Pennsylvania. Philadelphia city as well as county, very blue. Western Pennsylvania, particularly southwestern Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh suburbs, has long been a real Democratic stronghold. A lot of heavy industry, unionized labor, declining industry, although Pittsburgh is sort of successfully reinventing itself. Carnegie Mellon and other important universities have helped build up a kind of a high-tech center, but the overall area is in decline. And this is, well, in the last phases of the campaign, what has the McCain campaign done? Focus on Pennsylvania, figuring that especially these areas of western Pennsylvania with a lot of blue-collar workers, a lot of unemployment, population decline, a lot of heavy Catholic areas, a lot of anti-abortion politics, figuring that the McCain campaign might be able to pick off Pennsylvania. Latest polls I've seen show that actually McCain has gained a lot of ground, dropped Obama's lead from about 12% to about 6%, but it still seems pretty solid. This is an interesting part of Pennsylvania right here. It's the Anthracite coal belt, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. Actually, what is this? Lucerne County has, I think, the highest Polish background of any county in the country. This is heavy coal mining area in industrial decline, Joe Biden's background. You have Philadelphia, some of the rich suburbs, what is this, Montgomery County, Bucks County, recently shifting into the Democratic category, very recently. This used to be solidly Republican. In fact, Philadelphia didn't have a Democratic mayor till I think 1952. Philadelphia was, of all the big cities, the most Republican probably. Certainly Philadelphia now heavily Democratic voting. But then go to places like York County, Lancaster County, rapidly growing. York County, here you're almost in the Baltimore suburbs, but that has been very Republican. Here's State College, even in the university town here, Republican voting, Altoona Republican voting. So you have this is a fast-growing area, and it's Republican here. And then this is an area of decline, population decline, sort of divided Republican and Democratic zones. And Should I keep going through states, or do we want to just... Okay, go to Ohio. I do have Ohio here. Some interesting patterns. Cincinnati really stands out. A large city, which is Republican voting. Very heavy German background. It's tended to become quite culturally conservative in recent years. Dayton, Democratic voting. A big growth area is around Columbus. Franklin County went for the Democratic candidates, but it's suburban county. I think this is Delaware County. Does anyone know Ohio? I believe that's Delaware County. And that has gone, that's fast growing, relatively affluent. And it's a place that certainly Obama's targeting very heavily, because he knew that these suburban counties around here had gone Republican, wanted to get them. Here's Athens, Ohio University. Again, we can see that pattern. And then you get into the industrial cities and counties of Toledo, Cleveland, places like Canton and Akron, Youngstown, declining population, Rust Belt, a lot like Western Pennsylvania, has been very Democratic, but place with culturally somewhat conservative. We have some wealthy counties up here that are Republican voting as well. Okay, I do want to have some time for discussion. I have a few other state maps we can look at, so if anyone has a state they really want to see, you can ask. I don't have them all, but I have a couple others. But I am just curious about what comments you may have. Yes?
So I'd just be interested in projecting the future a little bit. You described two trends, one where the rural red states are losing population, the rural areas.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Whereas the urban blue states are also losing population. Number one, where are these people going, and how is that likely to change the electoral map in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question having to do with population dynamics, and maybe I can go back to my population. If I can find it here, my change. Yeah, the change in population. Where are people going? Well, certainly California is still a big magnet. A lot of the California counties don't show up on the percentage growth rate because a lot of them already have so many people. If you look at it in absolute numbers, though, we would have counties like San Bernardino would be in these fastest growing counties just in terms of how many people they've added. You have these certain sort of thriving suburban zones, mostly in the Sun Belt, but not entirely. The areas around Minneapolis and St. Paul, look how they have grown. Also, university towns often are population growth magnets. Dane County of Madison, Wisconsin, you can see how it's grown. You can see Detroit's huge decline, but Oakland County, Washington County, these others, they've seen corresponding growth. Well, Washington, that's where Ann Arbor is. That's long been Democratic. Oakland County, relatively well-to-do county, has recently shifted from the Republican to the Democratic side, but not by very much. But that's where the real sort of battle is going to be. And you can see even in South Dakota, you have Sioux Falls really gaining in population. It has suburbs now. How are these areas going to go? So I think that's really key. Now, some sociologists of religion have said that in these really fast-growing suburbs where you get these instant towns and people don't know their neighbors, and there often isn't very well-developed infrastructure. The big mega churches move in and sort of fill that social role, and that correlates with highly Republican voting patterns. That may be changing, though. We'll see what this election brings, but I suspect that a lot of these suburban counties that had been pretty heavily Republican are going to be switching, but in some parts of the country more than others. I'm actually, as I started looking at it, I was surprised at how conservative a lot of these Minneapolis suburbs are. And I sort of thought of Minneapolis as a lot like I thought of San Francisco. And the city, yes, but you get in the suburbs, no. But any ideas anyone have, I'd love to hear it. And again, and the course forum, if anyone has ideas or knowledge about these, please do join in the conversation. Yes? Well, certainly white flight to the suburbs happened very dramatically after Civil Rights Act, and especially after busing to achieve racial integration in schools. So that happened 70s and 80s to a very large degree. Now actually you're getting black flight. Places like Compton and Watts in Los Angeles, they are losing black population, gaining Hispanic population, and a lot of the African Americans are moving to places like Lancaster on the high desert area. And you've had a lot of black suburbanization in places like DeKalb County near Atlanta, Prince George's County in Maryland. So yeah, you're having sort of that as well. So yeah, that's certainly part of it. Some cities have stabilized and are now growing again. Others just continue to decline. Detroit, it's gone from 1.6 million to 800,000. Its former mayor now in prison. There's been a lot of efforts to revive Detroit. It's hard to imagine how much it is going to revive. I'm not too hopeful about that. Yes? Yeah, so the comment is places like some of the inner suburbs in Detroit that had been industrial, blue-collar, working-class, white suburbs, now more African-American. And then so you sort of get this chain movement and sort of continuing flight out to the newer suburban fringe. A lot of this movement depends on cheap gasoline for commuting patterns. And with gasoline more expensive, it becomes somewhat more difficult. But then I guess the question of mass transit comes in. But yeah, absolutely right. That's been a big factor. Yes?
Can you show us Indiana, Missouri, two states that are red states that might think about this question?
I don't have sort of focused maps of Indiana and Missouri. But if you look at Missouri here, it's really an amazing pattern. You have St. Louis City and St. Louis County, and you have Kansas City, and not much else. Missouri now is about neck and neck. Even places like Columbia, which you see is not quite as dark red, the university town again, went in this last election Republican. Very, very Republican in the Ozarks. A place like Branson, Missouri. Anyone been to Branson? Second most important country music center. Very, very heavily Republican. Farm counties up here, not a little more purple in orientation. But if you could see the population map, you'd see that St. Louis and Kansas City and their suburbs are really pretty dominant. I would suspect in this next election we'll see a few of the counties in the middle going for Obama and a little more sort of expansion in the fringe area. Indiana, you can see Gary, suburban Chicago essentially. You can see Indianapolis. You can see Indiana University down here as Democratic counties and really nothing else. So Indiana has been very reliably Republican voting for a long time, and it shocked a lot of people to see these polls that put the McCain advantage at only a couple of percentage points. Again, you can sort of see it on this map. Suburban counties around Indianapolis, they've been growing very rapidly, very sort of extremely Republican. You notice it driving across Indiana. You see more American flags than you do in Illinois and in Ohio. Why that is, it's hard for me to say. I don't really understand. We've been talking a little bit about this on the course website, but it's sort of somewhat inexplicable to me. I don't know if you've got. Yeah, I'm trying to find a good map. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting comment. Baby boom now coming into retirement age. You often have a lot of movement, so certainly Florida and Arizona have benefited from that tremendously. In Arizona, we see the Tucson area traditionally Democratic, the Phoenix area traditionally Republican, both of which have had Tucson having a much more important University of Arizona there. But now the comment is, more people retiring to college towns. I spent some time in North Carolina. I taught at Duke for a number of years, and boy, you could certainly see it in the area around Chapel Hill. Oh, here, that's Chatham County right there, which had been a rural county. Now you can see advertisements in the New Yorker for Farrington Village, a retirement area just south of Chapel Hill. And why do people go there? Well, they can go to classes like this, and you got music, and you got culture, you got cultural amenities associated with universities. And so we see a lot of these universities counties growing quite rapidly and maintaining quite a liberal voting trend. So yeah, I think that will probably continue. And there is a huge cohort now going into retirement age, and it will be interesting. There still is going to be a certain movement away from snowy areas, I think, as older people. Well, my mother-in-law and father-in-law have recently moved from Columbus, Ohio to Santa Rosa, California. My mother-in-law has mobility impairment and slipped on the ice a few times, and that was enough. So that is still happening, which again is going to sort of push people into the south and west of the country. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Thanks for the question. Okay, we've got a little bit more time. Yes?
Up in the northeast corner, I find Maine curious.
Yes.
So, 2 congressmen, both Democrats, 2 senators, both Republicans.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, that's Olympia Snowe and Susan Collins, who are both relatively moderate Republicans, but they've done very well in recent elections. And Maine has a real sort of independent streak. Certainly remember Ross Perot did extremely well in Maine. So they don't go for the cultural conservatism of the southern-oriented Republican Party. They don't go for that in Maine very well at all, or in New Hampshire as much. You can see New Hampshire still has a number of Republican voting counties, and again, McCain thought that New Hampshire would be a good place for him. It hasn't worked out that way as well. The 2 counties, let's see, I can't remember the name of this county. I know it grows most of the blueberries in the country. Washington County. We have a lot of paper mills. That's very low population density up in that area. Even the potato growing area way up there, that really surprises me. You may know more about that it's Aroostook County, is that what it's called? Yeah, very, very distinctive cultural area. It sort of surprised me that it's gone for the Democratic Party. A lot of French Canadians, that's true, and French Canadians tend to be more liberal in their politics. Good point. That's an important factor. Maine and Vermont used to be the 2 most reliably Republican voting states. They're the only states that voted for Alf Landon in 1936. But they have, as a Republican Party made the bid for the South, that changed the constitution of the Republican Party. And if I look through American political history, one thing seemed constant is these people are not going to vote the same way as the white people in this region, right? And that has been throughout the history of our country. So as parties change their regional base, there'll be sort of corresponding shifts. I don't know, that's my best guess. Some of you know more about Maine than I do. Maine's the one state I haven't been in. I've been in all the others, but I've never been to Maine. So I should go there and examine it a little bit. Yes, yeah. So that fits a strong independence. I think Mainers have that self-identification. I think as being independent and not. I don't know. Does that fit perceptions of people who know Maine better than I do? Yes. Yeah. Ross Perot, did he take more votes from Bush or for Clinton? He certainly took them from both. I think the consensus is probably helped Clinton. I see some people are agreeing with me. No, I don't think it was entirely clear-cut, but overall, a lot of Perot voters were fairly conservative, certainly conservative economically. They were wary of, their big issue was the debt. And actually, Clinton came in, and one of his first priorities was to start reducing the deficit. But that was a bit unexpected, and there were big fights in the Clinton administration against the deficit hawks and those who wanted to spend more on social programs. And Clinton ultimately decided to go the way of deficit reduction, much to the consternation of people like Robert Reich and others on the left in his administration. So that's a good point. Yes? In Canada, okay, well, why Canada has moved in a more conservative direction? Yes, to some extent that has happened, but yet if you were... The conservatives in Canada are not nearly as conservative as the conservatives in the United States, and liberals tend to be somewhat more liberal, maybe one way of looking at it. Alberta being a bit of an exception, which even by American standards is fairly conservative, but elsewhere I'd say all of Canada is shifted somewhat to the left. And there's a way when you have democratic systems like this, you get a pendulum, and you go back and forth between parties. And if one party gets too strong and tries to push things too far in its direction, then there'll be an eventual reaction and sort of pull it back. And Canada and the United States may be just out of synchronization to some extent. But that's a good point. But Harper's has received pluralities, not majorities. Because they basically have a fourfold political system in Canada, right? You got the Conservatives, the Liberals, the New Democrats, and the Parti Québécois. So that makes this really complicated geographical arrangements. Quebec is voting for its own sort of national party, which tends to be quite left on many issues. And so you get, and also it's a parliamentary system, so you get the more complicated coalitions forming, I suppose, might be one way of looking at it. What time do we have? We're out of time. Thank you very much. Election obviously coming up. Again, I'd urge everyone to look at the course website. I'll post something tomorrow. But it's obvious from the discussion that a lot of you know a lot more about certain places than I do, and I'd love to have your insight on any of these states, counties, parts of the country, and their interesting voting patterns. So see you next week, and thank you.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Stanford University. Please visit us at stanford.edu.